Well, welcome, folks. We appreciate you all joining us here today for this special event. I have a few words I'm going to say at the very beginning, and then we're going to get the show started. I wanted to let some of you know, a lot of you know this already, but some of us are learning this, that people of Hispanic origin are the country's largest ethnic and racial group. And in Los Angeles County, it is the largest ethnic group. It's about 48% of the population, roughly half of LA County is of Hispanic or Latino origin. And it is Los Angeles County has the largest Hispanic population of any county in the entire country, right? So this is a very special place for this event to be happening. We're very proud to play a role, small role anyways, in honoring the Hispanic heritage this month. And the event today is called Hispanics in the White House, from the Secret Service to the First Lady's office. We have some really amazing speakers for you here today, and a very esteemed moderator I'll turn it over to. Before I do want to thank our partners for today's event, and there are many, and I don't want to forget anyone, so I wrote them down. So I want to thank the USC Latino Alumni Association. Yeah. Yay. Thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate the USC Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Yay. Thank you. I want to thank the USC Price Latinx Student Association. All right. And I also want to thank La CASA. Yay. Yeah, La CASA. Excellent. And last but not least, the Trojan Democrats, who also partner on today's event. Yeah, and with that said, it's my pleasure to turn over the proceedings to our very esteemed moderator, Dr. Maria Romero-Morales.
Thank you for that warm welcome, and I will introduce our guests in a few minutes, but I just wanted to quickly just add a little bit of background and context in terms of why I'm sitting on this chair moderating today's event. My name is Maria Romero-Morales, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. And I am with the Office of Inclusion and Diversity, which is a brand new office here on campus. We have been in existence for about 1.5 years. And I focus on student engagement, community, and communications. And so that's a huge platform that I have and responsibility that I have before you, on me. And I'm carrying with me, but more importantly, I'm carrying the perspective of a triple Trojan. So I went to this campus as an undergrad and sat on your chair probably like 20 years ago, but we won't say specifically what year. So I went to Marshall undergrad, and in business administration is my bachelor's degree. My master's is in public policy. From Price as well, and my doctorate now is in higher education from Rasier. So I've been around this campus for a long time, and my office now is situated in Bovard. And for those of you undergrads who are here, you know the significance of having an office in Bovard. And so for me as an undergrad, that was a huge significance when I would walk by Child's Way and Truesdale and wonder, who are those folks inside that office? Behind that window, behind those windows, who are those folks? Because those folks must be pretty important, because they're making some pretty good decisions about what is happening on this campus. And so when I came on board about 1.5 years ago, and I walked into Bovard and I saw my window, and I was now on the other side of that window. I really felt a sense of responsibility to you all. And that's why I want to make sure that I'm sharing that story. I purposely, to this day, will take phone calls right in front of the window that faces Tudor Center. So if you're grabbing lunch, you're going to see me standing by that window, because I purposely want you to see me in there. I want you to see that there is a woman of color, a Latina, first gen, transfer student who has made their journey from all these different pathways into USC, and now I'm inside Bovard. It's a huge responsibility, but I want you to know that I recognize, I see you, and I validate your experiences here on this campus. And I'm incredibly proud to be here before you and moderating this, this panel. So I will pass it over to our distinguished guest today. Noelia Rodriguez is joining us, and Noelia will be able to provide us a little bit of background, as well as Hector Hernandez will give us everything about their journey. And I have some questions that we will walk through, and then we'll open it up for some conversation and questions from the audience. Does that sounds like a deal? All right, so let me hand it over to Noelia. Noelia, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background and why you're excited to be among us today?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm very excited to be among all of you. Thank you for the Center for the Political Future for hosting this event, and for our many co-hosts and sponsors. What a great day. And I also want to point out that I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. I'm leading a study group this semester at the Center for the Political Future, so I want to have my students who are in my study group raise their hands, because I want to acknowledge them and say thank you for coming out during your very, very valuable time. Thank you. So on Wednesday afternoons at 4 o'clock, we have a study group, and it's called Communications from the East Wing to the West Coast. And we have had a great series of speakers, and we're going to continue to have some more for the next few weeks. And it's been such an experience to be a part of the USC family. And I had actually a couple of weeks ago, Hector was one of my guest speakers from Washington, D.C., where he lives. Actually, he's in Maryland. And out for Hispanic Heritage Month, and so the conversation is going to be a lot of fun. So just to give you a little background about me, I won't go into great detail because, as Maria said, she was here 20 years ago. I probably I have a few years on her, so we don't have enough time for this lunch hour to talk about my life. But let me just tell you that thank you so much. I had actually been a fellow at Harvard University about 15 years ago doing the same kind of program. And I loved it so much that I ended up staying, and I was the director of the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum, where I got to continue to experience politics, but not from inside the circle, more as a spectator, and having a lot of events with heads of state, political leaders, pundits, everybody that you see on television. Not everybody, but many of them would show up at the forum, and I got to be a part of that world and took what I learned from that, and now I'm applying it here at USC with the students that we have. So yes, I did work at the White House, and we were talking about this in my study group yesterday because we had Gene Becker, who was former President Bush 41, his chief of staff for the 25 years after he left. He was out of office up until literally the day he passed away. And we were talking about how I don't think any of us ever thought, one day I'm going to be at the White House and I'm going to be working on this. That never happened to me. I had the good fortune of, I think, having a non-traditional, is what they used to call it, path to success. I actually went to community college, and then I was a transfer student. And then I was working full-time while I did all that. And once I got that piece of paper that said that I'm officially smart, then I started getting promoted at the company where I worked. And so I took every opportunity to advance my career, not just because I was self-interested, but because I saw opportunities, and if they weren't there, I created them myself. And so ultimately, in corporate communications, which is where I ended up, I got picked up by the mayor's office to be the press secretary to the mayor of the second largest city in America. Sounds fabulous, but guess what? I had no idea what a press secretary did. No idea. But if the mayor had faith in me, this guy who's the mayor for the second largest city in America, then I better have a little bit more faith in myself. So that's lesson number one. Faith in yourself, because that's what is going to drive you, especially now. It's just, you have people like Dr. Morales and Hector Hernandez and myself to be here to support you in your studies and in your career so that you can help yourself be more confident and you learn from our experiences. So flash forward to 2001, and I became the press secretary to First Lady Laura Bush at the White House. So what's interesting about that is that when my last year in Los Angeles, I had been a deputy mayor, and then I was the president and CEO of the host committee for the Democratic Convention. I pretty much grew up in California and had been a lifelong Democrat. So when I got the call from the president's team to come and interview for this position, I literally laughed. I said, I'm a Democrat from California, and I just worked on this little project called the Democratic Convention. What part of that is going to say, let's hire Noelia? So, well, Anna laughed, my friend who had called me about this. She had been Barbara Bush's press secretary, and she says, Laura's going to love it, and George is going to love it even more. So the next thing I know, I'm in Austin, Texas, interviewing for this job. 45 minutes later, I'm offered the job. That doesn't usually happen. So, but I think one of the things was that at that point, I had grown enough to have confidence in myself. And it also didn't hurt that I had a Texas connection because I was born in Brownsville, Texas. So I always tell people, my heart's in Los Angeles, but I get my soul from Texas. And so that really helped me succeed. And that's where I got to meet Hector Hernandez, and we've become lifelong friends, and he'll tell you a little bit more about himself. But now, flash forward to what are we, 2022, and this year I got to meet Dr. Maria Morales, because in my real life, I'm a chief of staff at Metrolink, and Dr. Morales is on our board. So I am so lucky to know her through that affiliation, and now here at USC. So one more thing before I turn it over to Hector. So I was there at the White House with the First Lady on 9/11, which is the biggest, most pivotal moment in most of our nation's most of our histories, personal histories also. And as a result of that, I stayed with the administration through the end of 2003. But on the one-year anniversary of 9/11, those of us who had been on the White House team each got this pin. It's a flag, and it looks like it's wrong because it's vertical. And so just a little tip, if you're ever going to hang a U.S. flag, the blue is always at the top left corner. So you see it, if it's horizontal, it's on the top left. If it's vertical, it's on the top left. This is a replica of the flag that was hanging at the Pentagon after 9/11, when there was still recovery and rescuing going on. So proud moment for me. I was there, have stories to share about that, but for now I'm going to turn it over to Hector Hernandez.
That's a lot right there. Oh my goodness. Well, let me get the thank yous out of the way first. Well, obviously I want to thank Kami and the Center for the Political Future, Dr. Morales, and of course my good lifelong friend Noelia, and of course the other distinguished guests that were kind enough to show up for today. But I especially want to thank, and also all the people in virtual Zoom world. Hey, hello.
He's talking to his
We
wife.
haven't forgotten you. We know you don't have any real clothes on. That's okay. We want to be comfortable. But I really want to thank all of you for coming. To me, the students are really the main purpose why we're here, and that's because we want to make sure that we not only share experiences and share some of the challenges that we've been through and some of the successes, but we also want to encourage you. I know I want to encourage you. I know right now there's the smaller stuff is on your mind, that test or that one course, and those things, those are real. Those are real to you. And believe me, we've all been there. But there's a bigger picture that you need to continue to focus on too. And that's going to be, the end result. And that's going to be your future, and how you are not just going to put money in your bank, but how you're going to have an impact on this, not only our own country, but possibly the world. So that's what I'm here for. I want to make sure that I encourage you. But real quickly, so I always like to say that I came from a very humble beginning. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. Yay. And I come from a very athletic family. My father was a middleweight champion of Mexico in boxing. My oldest brother was a heavyweight champion of boxing from Mexico. My other brother, Mondo, and my other brother, Willie, were very accomplished boxers too in their own right. I unfortunately chose to keep the model face, so I did not box, but I did wrestle, and I was a couple of times city champion in El Paso. I ended up doing well enough to where I got a college scholarship. So I did not, and this is another thing I wanted to add too. You guys are so fortunate to be at USC. I mean, my goodness, where we come from. I mean, when you hear the word, or the acronym USC, I mean that's big time, and it is big time. So don't diminish it. Don't forget that what you're doing and where you're at, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for anybody. So continue to push forward. When you become discouraged. So I went to a small school, Division III school, New Mexico Highlands University, in the big city of Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada, but yeah, no slot machines, just an all subs and maybe a Kmart. I don't know. But I was fortunate enough to get a wrestling scholarship there, so I attended there. I had my bachelor's degree in political science. I ended up staying, and I got my master's degree in political science and sociology. And in the meantime, athletically, I was able to win my conference several times, and then my senior year, I was able to win nationals. So to me, and as a super heavyweight, right? So I know a lot of times people see me now, they're like, well, he's kind of, so did this job stress you down? I said, well, it was a little stressful. So I used to be, 6'7", full head of hair, and I was Caucasian. So it has worn me down a little bit, but I'm making a comeback. Yeah. But in all seriousness, I was able to get, my degrees, came back home, and then I had actually a kind of a little smorgasbord of different jobs. I worked as a juvenile probation officer for a little bit while I was waiting. I was applying for law school. And then I ended up going to work for the Social Security Administration. My school had submitted my name to a bunch of jobs, and they ended up calling me because they needed translators. So a side note, real quick, I was just sharing this funny story with Dr. Morales and Noelia. My first day in Oklahoma, I showed up to the Social Security Administration, and of course, I'm this color normally. I don't get lighter. This is it.
This is not a summer color.
That's right. That's right. So I showed up, and my very first day, I went to the window, and a nice young lady there, and she said, "Hi, can I help you?" And I said, "Yes. My name's Hector Hernandez. I think today's my first day." And she said, "Oh my gosh!" And she turned around and she started screaming, "Mary, our new Hispanic is here! Our new Hispanic is here!" I felt like I was like an Amazon package, like it's finally here. So that was my introduction to like, hey, you are not in El Paso anymore. And I suddenly was emerged into this sea of, about 250 some odd employees that were not me. And so that was kind of my first lesson on how am I going to cope with being different, at least in other people's eyes. Because to me, I was just Hector, but I could obviously see that they did not know anything about the Mexican culture, nothing about El Paso, Texas, much less my first language, which was Spanish, and then the foods that we eat, things like that. So I really took it as an opportunity to really bestow on them my experiences, my background. So from there, I ended up, I helped out, actually, ironically, the Secret Service was in that same building, and I helped them with a case. They needed some translation, and I ended up getting recruited, and I moved to Dallas, Texas, and that's where I was sworn in. Yay! I was sworn in February as a special agent with the U.S. Secret Service, and I started my career there. I did about 7 to 8 years there doing investigations. So in Secret Service, we do counterfeit investigations, credit card fraud, threats to the president, so various investigations. And then at that point, I became senior, and they ended up transferring me to Washington, D.C., where I started my protection phase. And my first president that I was with was President Clinton. So I have, many, many great memories and many stories and experiences from that detail there. I then transitioned into the, President Bush Jr. and Laura Bush that came in, that's when Noelia and I crossed paths, and we started becoming great, great friends. And we have some really great stories that we actually worked together. In fact, that Pentagon story. So the day they hung that flag, we were with the president. I was on the shift that day when we went over there as they unfolded it and let it down, and they had the big memorial really for the tragedy that had happened. And then and so on and so on. My career continued to ascend. I really worked hard to showcase my skills. All of the skills that, and we'll talk about in detail later on, but all my communication skills, my diplomacy skills, my negotiation skills, all of those skills that you probably are working on right now were very beneficial for me later on in my career, where if I'm having to go into a city and ask a CEO to take over his building for a week and have him shut down his parking lot, you can't just do that by dictating it. You actually have to massage it and negotiate and maybe even meet halfway, things like that. So those skills are just something that I'll never forget. And then after I ended up doing all my protection time, I did get promoted, so on and so forth. I ended up getting into the executive levels. And the latter part of my career, I was in charge of vice presidential protection with Vice President Pence, and then I was promoted at the very end of my career as Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Training. So that's kind of half my career was protection, and the other half was training. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Morales. But I just want to kind of give you a little thumbnail of kind of how I got to be where I'm at, and again, very privileged, very honored to be here with you guys today. So thank you.
Thank you both. So let me pose this question to you both. And Noelia, you've already mentioned a little bit of some of that experience, and for you as well, Hector. So Noelia, as the first Mexican American to ever serve a press secretary to a first lady, and Hector, for you, first ever Latino to serve in the Vice Presidential Protection Division of the Secret Service, why were you the first? Can you dive into that and let us know what that meant to you? What does that look like on the job? And I think you've kind of already started to touch on this, but what were some of those experiences around racism that you experienced?
Okay, I'll start first. I was very fortunate because one of the things that I learned long ago in my career, and I talked a little bit about this last night with our study group, is it's so important, and it's, if you haven't already started, start today. Start at this event to network. And that is really, you are going to meet people while you're here on campus that you are going to know for the rest of your lives. You may not talk to them all the time, but on occasion, these relationships are going to make a difference for you. And so when I was the press secretary for the mayor of Los Angeles, this was in the old days when we literally had paper newspapers that would come to our offices every morning. And I was quoted very often in the LA Times. And I tried, not as good as Hector Hernandez, but I tried to have a little humor, or used to anyway, in my quotes, when it was appropriate, of course. So one day I get a phone call from a woman named Anna Perez. Anna had been Barbara Bush's press secretary. She was the first Latina to have that position. I was the first Mexican American. But Anna calls me, I have no idea who she was, and she says, I've been reading your quotes in the paper. I think you're funny. We must meet. So we did, and we had breakfast, and then we kept in touch maybe once a year after that. And the last time I had talked to her was right before the convention in Los Angeles, which I was in charge of. And she called me because, remember, Anna's a big Republican. She said to me, I just want to wish you luck, but not too much luck. And so, so it was a very successful convention. So flash forward to December when the Supreme Court decided the election and President Bush became the president-elect. Anna called me and she said, I've been asked by Laura to identify people to recommend for this position, and she says, I only want to recommend you. And that's when I said, really, what part of me are they going to say yes to? I never thought about the fact that I'm, Mexican American or anything like that. I really thought about as the political atmosphere that we were in at the time. And she laughed, and the rest, as I said a few minutes ago, is the way it panned out. I was very fortunate, and I think as a nation we were very fortunate, because the thing about President Bush and Mrs. Bush, he had been governor in Texas. And so huge, obviously, Latino population there. And as a governor, he had built relationships with President Fox, who had been a governor at the same time in Mexico. So and in fact, I made a little bit of a side trip here in, I think it was 1994, when Prop 87 was a big deal in California as part of the gubernatorial campaign that year. It was anti-immigrant. And I remember, I wasn't even connected in any way to the Bushes when they were in the governor's office, but I remember President Bush saying, or Governor Bush then saying something like, anybody who's willing to walk 500 miles for a job, I want working in my state. And so that was when I thought, okay, what a stark difference between him and what was going on in California. So from that perspective, going to work for a Republican, it wasn't going just to work for a Republican, but this Republican. And so going to work for somebody who understood the people that we are, the history that we have, and the futures that we all deserve. And in fact, a week before 9/11, the President and Mrs. Bush hosted, not even a week, 6 days before 9/11, the President and Mrs. Bush hosted the first state dinner of their administration, and it was with President Fox. So that tells you a lot about the politics and, the friendship, quite frankly, between our two nations at that point. And so it made me very proud. But I'm going to tell you a little side story related to that, that state dinner. So weeks before the state dinner, the planning is, they didn't just decide that September, let's have, the president over for dinner. It takes months to plan for this. So early in the administration, they had planned that this was going to happen in September. And a part of that, it's selecting the menu, selecting the table linens, the china, which is a big deal. And the bigger deal, which is talk about diplomacy, is who's going to sit at what table next to whom. And so there's a dry run right before, about a month before the state dinner, and Mrs. Bush invited me to sit in the dry run. So you go into the state dining room where you see the Lincoln portrait hanging, and they have all of the settings for what the state dinner is actually going to look like. So, everything's going well. And then we get to the centerpieces. And the flower shop, that's done by the flower shop. Do you remember the story? The flower shop, they're fabulous team members. There's literally a flower shop at the base of the White House. They put flowers every single day throughout the White House. It's like a job I would want in my second life, So the settings are in honor of the colors green for agriculture and representing the country of Mexico. So you have white hydrangeas, all the greenery, you have green limes, and then you have cascading green grapes. And Mrs. Bush looks at me, and I look at her, and she says something like, lose the grapes, lose the grapes. Because obviously it would have created a political, reference to, grape growers and farm pickers and Cesar Chavez, and it would be not a good diplomatic move. Something as simple as that was so profound, and I was so proud of Mrs. Bush. I mean, not that I ever doubted that she wouldn't have this sensitivity, but the fact that she was the one who recognized it told me a lot about Mrs. Bush and the president. So, and recognizing my heritage and the impacts of these symbols, which are so profound. So I think that's just one story that I want to share, that I don't think I ever felt from the president and Mrs. Bush anything but pride that I was a part of their team. Just after 9/11 and that first Thanksgiving, my mother came to visit the White House for the first time. We gave her a tour. At the end, I surprised her by having the president and Mrs. Bush say hello to her on the way out of the diplomatic reception room. And I'll never forget, they had just done a photo shoot for the cover of Newsweek magazine. So my mom, I had purposely had her back to the door. And in comes the president and Mrs. Bush, and the president puts his arm around my mom, and he says, buenas tardes, Graciela. And she looks at him and she says, oh my God, you're more handsome in person than I would expected, as only a mom could say. And of course, I'm kind of embarrassed, but also proud of my mom. And then he says, typical George Bush says, it's the makeup. And so it was just such a proud moment for me that anybody who's going to treat my mom like a queen is good in my book. So at that moment, then he said to Mrs. Bush, Laura, did we invite them to camp for tomorrow? Camp David for Thanksgiving. So we spent Thanksgiving 2001 at Camp David with the president and Mrs. Bush. I have pictures.
Big deal. Big deal.
I never felt like I was out of place with them, thanks to them. They were so fabulous. Maybe in other times in my life, but not when I was working for Mrs. Bush.
Fantastic. Hector, do you want to
Sure.
chime in?
So just so you'll know, so staff and Secret Service innately were always arch enemies. Because as she was mentioning earlier, the flowers and the tables, well, from our perspective, when we're on that advance with the staffers, we could care less whether they're green or whether they're blue, whatever. We just care that they don't go boom. Right? So we put them wherever you want. I don't care how big they are, whatever. Just they got to go through that magnetometer. They got to make sure they get swept and things like that. So that's kind of a funny story. But so to get to your question, I think, so in our country, currently, and I think even back when I was still going through my career, I always felt like, sometimes our democracy sometimes is at battle. There are entities that are truly trying to destroy our democracy. And being, Latinos, being Hispanic in this country, I mean, we are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, we are democracy. We are what make up, democracy in this country. And sometimes, I felt like always letting people know how I felt. And, during my job, you can't do that. That's part of the professional side of being an agent. But, you know, we are Americans too. We just happen to be able to speak Spanish and we happen to have darker skin. But we are just as American. In fact, in some cases, even more so because we are ultra patriotic. So let me share something with you right now. I've, again, praise God, but I have been able to travel the world several times around because of my job. There is no, and I want to make sure that I emphasize this, there is no other place in this entire earth that God created, none better than the United States of America. None. Don't let anybody fool you. Every time I came home from a foreign trip, I was ready to just kiss the ground because this is the best place. As broken as sometimes we seem and not perfect, it's eons ahead of other places. Where if you want to protest in other places, go ahead. You better be ready to face those consequences, whether it be physical or whether it be emotional or some type of negative activity that's going to be directed towards you. Where here, you are free to do that. You're free to speak your mind. You're free to exercise your constitutional rights. So with that said, specifically down to an agency, every government agency is going to have problems with race and discrimination, across the board. But let's be real, every company, every state, local, every federal government, every private institution, every nonprofit, there is always going to be an issue with race. Let's face it, even within our own race. I know there was always the lighter-skinned Mexicans that they were always looking down on me because I was the, hey, he's the darker guy, he can be the menial guy, we're going to be the professionals. And I used to take that to heart. But it took me a long, long time for me to grow out of that, to realize that, hey, look, this is just skin. And then, coincidentally, I was getting bigger and stronger, so I could kick your butt anyway. But aside from that, the true reality is that it took me a while to understand and to realize that, hey, you know what? I belong to a beautiful people. I do. And we have made so many remarkable historical impacts on this country with music, with language, with food, with culture. I can go on and on and on and on. We are a force to be reckoned with, and it all starts with you guys. Because what you're doing now is you're developing your skills. Yes, you're learning a subject matter, and that's fine. And there may be some of you, just like Noelia mentioned earlier, there's going to be, you're going to be, projected to some other area of career where you're like, wait, I didn't even study that. But, other forces, God is going to force you into another area. And all of the skills that you're learning and all of the networking, that's where it's going to come into play. And wherever you go, wherever you land, that's where you're going to be able to showcase your culture, your background, your upbringing. When I first showed up to the White House, I remember I was so humbled. I mean, when I walked in my very first evening, it dawned on me as I was walking down this hall, and I'm thinking, my goodness, Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, President Johnson, like all of these people that I read about when I was a kid and before, they walk these hallways. And I had privilege, when you first start, you get the golden key. You can open up everything. We were shown everywhere because we had to for security reasons. You just felt so honored, right? And so for me, this little Mexican from El Paso, Texas, and here I am in the White House. Walking around where presidents do, and obviously then where the current president was just so humbling for me. And so, were there times when I felt discriminated against? Sure, but did I let that bog me down? Did I let that bury me? Did I let that steer me away from continuing to push forward? Absolutely not. And the very reason why was because I decided early on that it's too far ahead for me to start saying, oh, I'm going to be a successful this. For my mind, it was just too much. So what I decided was this. I'm going to be the number one for today. Every day I told myself that. I'd wake up. Today, I'm going to be number one. And that evening when I made it home to my family, hey, I was number one today. And then the next morning I woke up. And that's the way you had to do it. For our careers, we have a very long, staff came and went. Presidents come and go. But the United States Secret Service is permanent. We're not going anywhere. And I knew that mine was not a sprint like theirs. Mine is a marathon. And sometimes it felt like a sprint marathon. And so for me, those times that I felt like, I wonder why I didn't get that position. I wonder why I wasn't promoted. Wonder why I was not considered for that. I wonder why I didn't get to go to Sweden, but yet they sent me to, Uruguay or Paraguay. I would just basically kept focus on the mission, which was to continue to push forward. Obviously, our job was to protect the President of the United States of America. But more so for me, I can't tell you how many times I had, the young Latinos and Latinas, because we have, females, we have African American, we have all types of folks that work within the Secret Service, that they were coming up to me, thanking me, letting me know how proud they were that I was where I was at. And as I got higher and higher, they were very, very happy that I was there because I happened to be of color. And so to me, that was enough. To me, that was enough incentive and motivation to continue to keep pushing forward. And so right now you're at a stage where, and I'm sure that some of you have met, those little obstacles already. Don't worry about it. Just consider it practice, because it's not going to stop. There's always going to be people that don't, even our own people, right? There's always going to be that. Don't even give it any energy. Just get your energy and put it into success. Doctors don't happen every day. They have to work really, really hard. And you're going to have to work really, really hard. And when you do, the payoffs will come.
Thank you. That's very inspiring. Noelia, do you want to add a little bit more on that?
I want to say one thing also is that Hector and I share this, and also Dr. Morales does, that yes, we may have been the first. I was the first Mexican-American press secretary to the First Lady. Probably even it hasn't been one to the president yet, but that's coming better. So we're counting on that to happen. One of you guys will do it. If not, maybe your mom or dad who's out there. But we have such a responsibility, which we take very seriously, that we're not the last. Hector's done a lot of that with the training and the promotions that he's had the opportunity to affect in the Secret Service. I've done it throughout my career, and I'm really proud to say, I don't know if you all know, but the new press secretary who just started this week to the First Lady, Jill Biden, is a Latina, Vanessa Valdivia. And guess what? Bonus, SC alum, Annenberg. And we connected last Friday because, just to give her some tips and from my experience, and don't miss these things, because you're so busy doing the job that you miss the little things that nobody else in the whole country is going to have the opportunity to do or see or experience. So I told her, don't miss those little things that other people don't have access to. And I mean by that also the other White House staff. So I was really excited to talk to her, and I just want to do a shout out to her and wish her much success. And maybe when she gets her sea legs and has a chance to come back home, she can come and be a speaker at USC. Because her connection, 1 degree of separation from the new press secretary to the First Lady, and it's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's actually a perfect segue. So having had the experiences you both have, I think, Hector, you've kind of touched a little bit on it. What do you think is your role, your responsibility for the next generation, those students who are sitting in front of us, and in many ways to some of the young professionals that are already outside of this campus? How do you see yourself in terms of the work that you're doing and how you're paving that way for the next generation?
Well, thank you for that question. So I think that I've been doing that along my career, before I retired and since I've been retired. I do some different contract work now. However, any and all opportunities, and I don't just wait for opportunities now. I used to just wait for opportunities because I was a little nervous because of my job. But now I'm seeking out opportunities. I'll take any platform, any platform where I am going to be able to speak to people about our culture and about the opportunities that we should have. And whether it be private businesses. I was just telling Noelia last night. I was fortunate to. I was at an event working, but I was able to network with some people that were very high officials, and just hearing. They were asking me and hearing my story, and they were very, very impressed. Now, when you share your stories, because each and every one of you has got an impressive story. I know. I've met plenty of people all over the country, and I know each and every one of you. You've got some really, really great stories to tell. But stories aren't enough. It's all about preparing yourself. right? Because that does not sell, that does not get you the next step. So, Dr. Morales could be charming all day long. She still had to turn in that dissertation, and she still had to defend it, right? I could be funny all day long. I really can't be funny all day long. But at some point, I got to produce, right? Same with Noelia. I mean, hey, listen, she's going to be, hey, Noelia will get it done. But that's her reputation, right? You got to back it up. So, continue to again focus on that, on building it's what Noelia said earlier, right? Which was you have to really build yourself up. You really have to concentrate on you. Of course, help your fellow, students, but for yourself, prepare yourself. If I think about sports, and let's just say NFL, if one player, all he did was help the other guy and never worked on his own skills, well, he's not going to do very well. He's going to end up getting cut, and the other guy's going to end up becoming, rich and famous. So you got to just continue to work your mind, continue to learn, continue to push yourself, continue to work on skill sets that for the future are going to be good for you. So,
Noelia?
And just really quickly, in terms of preparing yourselves, seek out mentors who are going to be there to guide you. And I'll tell you, even from my experience, when I was, a little older than your age and in the workforce, there was nobody who looked like me or Dr. Morales or Hector around for me to say, hey, Hector, how did you do it? What tips could you give me? They just didn't exist. And so I didn't say, well, I'm not going to be able to get a mentor. But what I had the good fortune of having was a supervisor at the time. His name is Don Sedan, and he's in his 80s now, and which he's probably very proud of. I actually called him a couple of weeks ago to tell him what I'm up to. He was incredibly proud. But at the time when he was supporting my career, he was a middle-aged white guy. And now he's an old white guy, but he was still a white man. And he saw something in me, and he took the time to give me advice, help me learn from my experiences, totally just be my cheerleader. And he reminded me a couple of weeks ago that one of the proudest moments, if not the proudest moment that he ever had professionally, was when the FBI came knocking on his door when I was having my background check done for the White House. They wanted to talk to him about my personality, my weaknesses, where are my vulnerabilities as an American? Am I possibly weak to, being, what's the word I'm looking for if somebody comes to national security issues? And this FBI agent came into Don's house, and Don just went on and on about what a fabulous human being I was, how great my early days were, how hardworking I was, how dedicated I was to whatever organization I was, working for. And so that's my mentor experience. Yours is going to be different than that, but it's going to be even more valuable because it's going to be about you and your careers and help you get to whatever it is you want to do, even if it's not something that you even imagine for yourself at this moment in time.
Thank you both. We have a few minutes left, and I know some of you are getting ready to go on to your next class. So we wanted to open up this opportunity. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any sharing on your own that you would like us to consider, don't be shy.
It's not the time to be shy, guys.
It's not the time.
Anything, any question? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to know, when was the first time that you guys really felt that you made it? That this was, like, sort of when you really started to feel like that presence of, like, hey, my whole life has been working, my journey has been working. Like, when was that first one?
Did everybody hear that?
Can you repeat the question? Will you repeat it?
Yeah, so she's asking, at what point did we feel like we had really made it? And we really accomplished it. So I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't feel I'm there yet. I feel like I've finished that great chapter of my life. And you'll have to excuse me if I get emotional, but I still have so much more to give. And I have, to you guys, because you guys are the next generation. I've got 2 kids. My daughter's 25, my son's 23. And, this generation, you guys get slammed in the news. You guys get slammed in social media that you guys are the generation that just, listen, you guys can be as powerful as you want to be. And I think that's what I'm still looking forward to. So as far as have I made it yet, I don't want to say yes because I'm not done yet. And again, great chapter in my life. You know, a lot of great accomplishments, a lot of great stories that I can sit here and tell you all day long about South Korea, about Egypt, about you name it, about Afghanistan, you name it. But I think that there's something else that, you know, that my Lord and Savior has saved me for, and that's to still continue to give. And that's maybe the day that I take my last breath is going to be where I can, you know, huff out, you know, okay, I made it. But real quick, I just want to make sure I share this. So there's a book I read. I'll save you the title, but he envisioned passing away, and he's in heaven, and he's sitting across from God, and God looks at him and says, "Well, okay, here's your file," and he takes the file and he looks at it and he says, "Okay." He opens it up and he starts to look through the file, and he hands it back to God and he says, "Hey, I think this is wrong. This isn't me. I mean, this one says, you know, all of these things, you know, doctor and cured cancer, all these different things." And God took it back and he opened it back up and he said, "It is you. It's the person you were supposed to be when you were on earth." And that, when I heard it, when I read it, really made an impact on me, because I think each and every one of us, there's something that way bigger that we are supposed to accomplish. Again, that is huge, but there's nowhere near, she's nowhere near of what she's going to do. When she's done building up that department, at the time when she leaves, it's going to be something where people will look at like, holy smoke, built this, right? And then when she's on some other endeavor, right? When Noelia's done with whatever she's going to be doing, and it's like, whoa, how was this created? That's how. And so I can't say that I'm done yet, because I want to make sure that that as soon as, because if I do, then I feel like that I'm going to just relax and put it back in second gear, and I don't want to do that. I want to continue to push forward. I want to continue to push forward. I want to continue to succeed. And success can be defined in many different ways. And remember this, please. It's not about this. Don't seek just for money. Public service, if you decide to go into government, is a very, very, very rewarding career path. It really is. You can affect some change. You may not be able to, I've mentioned this to Noelia, you may not be able to change the world because it's too daunting to think about that. And you think about changing the country. Don't think about that. Think about and concentrate on affecting the pocket of excellence that you're around. So for right now, it's your class. And maybe your, you know, the little city you live in or whatever. Those are your little pockets of excellence where you actually really directly matter. Meaning, in the future, you run for Congress or you know, some kind of city councilman, something like that. Those are your little pockets of excellence where you can truly, truly make a difference. And then it can grow from there. And if each and every one of you does that, then think about it. All those pockets become one gigantic movement. And the next thing you know, the world is different. The world is better. The world has changed. So,
Ditto. No, but you know, you were so right, Hector. I mean, even in the positions that I've had, there are times that I say, "Wow, you know, I literally feel like I've been a failure at some things, and I haven't done enough. And gosh, I could have done more." Not that I'm done, because by no stretch am I done, but I'm talking about in that moment, in that experience, I could have done more. And I used to get down on myself on that, but then I realized, wait, that's a good thing, because it just pushes you to recognize what is going to be next for you, and it makes you a better person so that you are open to whatever is coming up next. Don't ever think that you have arrived, because those destinations change all the time. You change all the time. And as a result, you know, you know, it's like, where's that? There's something, I think it's GPS where it says, "You've arrived." No, I haven't. I don't see what I'm looking for here. That's a metaphor for my life. I don't see what I'm looking for here, so I'm going to keep looking. There's something better. There's something higher. There's something more purposeful. The fact that I'm here as a fellow makes me feel so good about myself. It just has inspired me and energized me in ways that you can't believe, because I just get so much energy from the students, and I see so much ahead for every one of you. And the fact that I could be a part of that little experience in your life makes me feel really good about myself.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any other questions out there? Oh, we have two. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Tammy. I'm a Filipina junior studying college high and business on And I was just kind of wondering, with your positions, you guys have always, you have to speak up about like what you think the best path is, what your opinions are for the best route to take for, you know, being a press secretary or being head of security. Has there ever been like an instance in which your opinions were blown off, or you were undercut purely because of your race or your gender? When did that happen? How did you handle that? And then how did you regroup and say, you know what? I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm capable of, and this is why you should respect me. This is why I deserve your respect, and that's why I should be taken seriously.
Okay.
You've been rejected.
So,
Nobody says how to read.
what part of do it don't you understand? So did everybody hear the question, have the advice that we've given? So yes, that has happened, believe me, especially as a press secretary. You know, you do your homework, you prepare, you role play with the mayor or the first lady to prepare for something, and then once the lights, camera, action is on, it's out of your hands, and whatever happens, happens, and then sometimes you have to do damage control. I didn't really have to do that with the first lady, but with the mayor, I find myself saying what he meant to say was, and he was always, you know, he thought he was as funny as Hector Hernandez, but he wasn't, and so he would say things that probably got him in trouble more than he should have. But what I was going to say on top of that is there definitely are times when I consider myself, one of the things that I could do really well, I believe, there might be somebody who argues that point, is that I'm confident to give unvarnished advice to the person I work for, because I do it from all of my experiences before I got to whatever position I'm in. And I look at the landscape and say, you know, think about this, or you might want to not do that. And it's up to them to take the advice. Whether or not they do, it's up to them. They're the decision makers. But if I don't provide the advice, then I have been, you know, remiss in my obligation. Then, you know, I just have that confidence to do that. Yes, I mean, my own family is afraid of my advice, but they'll do it because they're like, I'm the Hector in my family. They'll do it. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just, you have to learn to let go and say, okay, I get it. You want to do it? You're in charge, and good luck with that.
So it's a great question, and this is the reason why I wanted to touch on this real quick. So that question right there, a lot of you are going to be hearing in a job interview. Right after I retired, I was you know, being called for a couple of job interviews, and repeatedly, and obviously when I'm interviewing people for those positions, because they want to know how you handle rejection. They want to know whether you're a hothead, whether you get discombobulated, whether you are unreasonable, whether you can't negotiate, right? So keep that question in mind. How are you going to develop your skills so where if you're getting a no, and a consistent no with your ideas and with your suggestions and with your observations, it can be daunting, but there's a point where you start to learn how to sell it. And so in our job, or when I was with Secret Service, so again, we were, staff and security were innate enemies. And I don't know how many times I got no's, right? Because, so for example, if the president were coming into this building, right, and he was gonna attend this luncheon, they would be arguing that, hey, no, we wanna bring him in the front. We're like, absolutely not, we're gonna bring him in the loading dock area. No, we want him here because absolutely not, right? And it was always a you know, a yes or no, a yes or no, and always rejections, right? That's kind of more micro. But at a bigger level, when I actually got to be more on the executive level, there were bigger issues, budgetary questions. Hey, sir, we'd like to submit, you know, $umpteen million for this, you know, and I learned that it was all about presentation, and it was all about how to justify, right? Justification. You can't just come in and go, hey, sir, didn't we get $1.2 million for some new weights? No, didn't we just get, well, okay, why don't you elaborate on that? Well, sir, what we're doing is we've done a year's worth of piloting and research, and now we feel that CrossFit is going to be the up-and-coming future of physical fitness for people. So what we're going to do is we're going to invest money in these new types of technologies and these new types of equipment, and we're going to need $1.2 million, and this is how it's going to break, and we can, you know, and we can phase it in this. Oh, okay, well, then that's different. So you don't need the 1 point right away. No, so if you give us, you know, 100,000 here, then 200,000 there. So it's all about negotiation, right? So to get to answer your question, yes. I mean, there was plenty of times when we all got no's. I mean, and they got no's at the highest level, where the president would say, absolutely not. I'm not gonna wear a red suit. What's wrong with you people, right? Well, again, we don't care if it's pink, as long as somebody made sure there was no bombs in it. Right? So it was kind of easy for us. But anyway, so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, Victor.
Hi. I haven't felt as patriotic hearing you both in a long, long time. So thank you. And I was also almost driven to tears hearing you both. But my question is, the term American exceptionalism has a negative connotation, at least in my generation, and I'm assuming for the younger generation. What are your thoughts on that, and then this dichotomy of like the world we live in?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
American exceptionalism.
Can you be a little more specific?
Yeah.
I mean, at least one area that we can tackle.
Um,
One that really hits you.
It's disheartening about, like, political stunts are happening. It's disheartening for our community to see what happens in something as big as politics, but so there's a disconnect sometimes. I haven't felt as patriotic as today because of all of these reasons. So yes, there's a lot of work to do, and we're going to be working to change that, but I felt a lot of patriotism coming from both of you, and I felt that.
Yeah, well, and I think, and thanks for your question, it's a great question. So again, it goes back to what I started with earlier, and that is that I still feel that we are in a new battleground when it comes to our democracy. And I'm talking across the board, I'm not talking Republican, Democrat, Independent, no, I'm talking about our democracy as Americans in this country, right? Because there's a bigger enemy that we got to deal with, right? And those are, I don't have to tell you the two big countries that we need to worry about. We need to unite. Now, when we were with Rami and Maria earlier, we were talking about 9/11, and for me, Oklahoma City, which I was participating in that particular cleanup job. The country came together on those two occasions. Of course, other occasions, but on those two particular occasions, nobody was Democrat, nobody was Republican, and there was no black, no white. Everybody was red, white, and blue American. And but unfortunately, as those events start to fade away, so does the patriotism, so does that flavor, right? Suddenly we're all now back to being brown and over there, right? So again, for me personally, I feel that we need to continue to energize ourselves, to continue. So back to that pocket of excellence, right? I mean, you know what's wrong. So let me ask you this question. Let me turn it on you. What have you done to change it? You see what I'm saying? Because it's quick to see a problem, like, oh man, that's a huge issue. That's bad. Okay, well, do you have any suggestions? I just know that's bad. So that's what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. What I'm saying is that I think collectively, those issues need to be brought up, and they need to be discussed in a relevant forum, so you can get collective minds to be able to solve those problems. Patriotism is a tough one. But I think if we continue to, as we get more and more Latinos educated, so listen, I was just talking about this the other day. Mexican Americans make up the largest Hispanic group in the country, right? Cuban Americans, they're one of the smallest ones, but they're the most highest successful in high school graduations, college graduations, and in professional positions, doctors, lawyers, engineers. So why is that? People ask all the time, why is that? Well, I don't know the full answer. All I know is that, hey, we got to change that. As the Mexican American communities, we need to continue to endorse candidates, anybody that's going to be in positions of color, Latinos, that are going to be able to help. It all starts from when we're a little bitty. I mean, listen, a lot of my educational faults are from when I was really small, where teachers didn't pay attention to me. I'm not going to point to that issue, but holy smokes, I mean, I was getting ignored. And now, could I have done something about it? I should have, but I was a little kid. So we, as a collective body, we can change that. We just need to make sure that we put people in place that know what they're doing and that are going to be willing to make those changes. School board members, mayors, senators at the state level, senators and congressmen at the federal level. Those people, you want to make sure, there's some politicians that have come out from where I'm from, El Paso, Texas, where, they're passionate about making those changes. I think you know what I'm talking about. They're very passionate about that, and they're doing things about it. One of my weak areas was writing, and I would encourage you that if whatever weak areas you have, work on those, strengthen them. Because I think if I had been a stronger writer, when you say the word policy to me, my head hurts. But now, since I've been through my career, I realize policy is everything sometimes, because that's where the changes come. Funding, just you can go down a plethora of lists of where policy makes, it affects a community. It affects a community. A policy could ruin a community. So I think if you recognize some areas, I think you're going to end up finding is you're going to find people rallying, and it's going to reignite that patriotism. Because, man, I'm telling you, America is the greatest place in the world. Whatever color we are, this is still the greatest place in the world. But the difference is that we need to make sure that, when we feel down, we got to make sure that we're included in that. We are red, white, and blue too.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't add to that why we're all here today. The Center for the Political Future, it really is inspirational to me again. When I got into politics in the 90s, there was this thing called bipartisanship. And the elected officials in Los Angeles, there was no D or R next to them, still not, but we all know that where they all lie. So I got to work with President Clinton, Mayor Daley, Mayor Giuliani, when it was Mayor Giuliani, early Mayor Giuliani, and Mayor Reardon. And we did things on behalf of the country together in a bipartisan way. And then over the years, that's, for the reasons that Hector articulated, we have gotten away from that. And now the responsibility is, quite frankly, up to your generation to pivot back so that we have at least a modicum of civility among our elected officials and our public officials, because this is not the norm. This is not what you're seeing now is not what America is about. Hector traveled around the world many times. I got to go in Air Force One to 35 different countries, and I was always, always, always amazed when we'd be at a restaurant talking to waiters or busboys. Obviously, they knew we were with the delegation, or we were in a cab. They would recite to us about the history of America better than we knew it. We are the magnet for the world. People admire the United States. They believe that we are so lucky to be a part of this country and to be American. They want to even visit, let alone even think about living here. They would love to visit our country because they admire us so much. I would like for us to have that same pride and attraction and unity that they would have for us. I just think that, Václav Havel, who was the late president of the Czech Republic, said, democracy is hard. It is. I had the opportunity to meet him, and I just was in awe of this man who had been imprisoned and then became the president. And he's still right. It's so simple. Democracy is hard, but you each have one piece of the puzzle to make it great. And that's what I would implore you to do, because we're counting.
Think big, guys. Think big.
Think big.
Thank you all so much for the questions. Thank you both to Hector and Noelia for joining us today and gracing us with your experiences. I want to just close it up and say thank you to the Center of Political Future. Sorry, my mouth is getting a little dry here. Thank you all for taking the time to come and join us today. This is an amazing conversation that clearly needs we need to dive into this conversation even deeper. We have an entire month that we're celebrating Latinx Heritage Month here on campus, and we're really proud that we get to put these programs together to recognize the accomplishments of our community, of our Latinx heritage, and to have a space here on campus that would allow us to bring in all of these gifts that we all bring together. And as Noelia closed it up so nicely, we are all in this together, and we need to bring in all these ideas so that we together can move this country forward. Thank you all for being here, and again, thank you so much for joining us today.